Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and as always, it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, but before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go into patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network, and that is where you can find all of our exclusive content from all of our podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. So with that, let's get right into the first topic of the show. Well, let's get into the rundown of today's show. So obviously we're going to start off by talking about, at this current moment, who is the best team in the AFC. So we'll get into that in a second. Then we will talk about one of the bigger discussions, debates that's been happening in recent weeks. And for a while, I would say, is Brock Purdy a system quarterback? And obviously, you can make the case both ways. So we'll get into that. In the third topic of the show, we'll talk about the Jets and will they make the playoffs? So we'll get into that. And then we will conclude the show by talking about the NFL stat leaders after Week 6. So that's the rundown for today's show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about who is the best team in the AFC. Now, for me, it's between three teams. Right now, I would say it's between the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Bills. Now, obviously, two of those teams have played each other already. The Chiefs will play the Dolphins in Germany in a couple of weeks, and the Bills will play the Chiefs at some point during the year, towards the later part of the season. So, we'll get a better idea of how, the Chiefs stack up against those teams. We obviously saw the Bills and the Dolphins play each other earlier this season. And that didn't go so well for the Dolphins. Bills won that game. I think it was, 48-20, I think the score was. So, and that was in Buffalo. Now, these two teams do play each other the last game of the regular season. So that could definitely determine who wins the AFC East between those two teams. And I really hope it does, because that would be an awesome game. Yeah, so the final score was 48-20 when they played each other a couple weeks ago. And obviously, the Chiefs and the Bills, they've clashed over the years. Obviously, they met a couple of times in the playoffs, and the Chiefs obviously, won both of those games, the AFC Championship game in 2020, and obviously one of the greatest playoff games that I've ever seen, the AFC Divisional Round in Kansas City. The Chiefs winning that overtime thriller. Gabe Davis had 4 touchdowns in that game. It was unbelievable, right? It was four touchdowns. But regardless, he had a monster playoff game that year. So obviously, looking at I think right now these are the three best teams. The Bengals, they still kind of have to work their way back into that discussion. You have the Ravens there who are respectable as well. But right now I would put the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Chiefs as like the top three at the moment. Now the Bills offensively, the last couple of weeks, in London it was kind of a rough game. They really didn't get going until, the fourth quarter against the Jags in London. And obviously, they did struggle to score points against the Giants. They didn't score their points until the fourth quarter in that game either. Well, they at least scored, some points before the fourth quarter against the Jags. They waited till the fourth quarter to score all their points against the Giants, who are not a very good team. And obviously, these teams have all these teams have their issues. The Bills, they're dealing with some injuries on defense, and the last couple of weeks the offense has kind of struggled a bit. The Dolphins, their defense, I mean, isn't really the best. I mean, they were down 14-0 to the Panthers at one point. But then, you know what? Hey, they held them to, well, then again, that was a pick six that the Panthers had. But then they went on this, outscored the Panthers 42-7 the rest of the way. So not to say that the Dolphins' defense is bad by any means. There's that. And also, I think Tua Tagovailoa has had a great season. But I don't look at him as like one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. I think he is a solid quarterback. But I still have my concerns with him. But he's having a great season. He's having an MVP season as well. And then obviously you look at the Chiefs. Their offense has kind of been struggling this year. They're looking to, figure it out on offense themselves. But right now they're 5-1, same record as the Dolphins. So I mean, every team has got their issues, But that's just what I could think of when it comes to all those teams. And obviously the Dolphins, I mean, they suffered their loss against a team that they're fighting for the division. So that kind of knocked them off a little bit, but they got back on the right track. So currently, like, who is the best team right now in the AFC? And obviously, I think we'll get, a clearer picture once, we see, the Chiefs play against the Bills and the Dolphins. But right now, I would probably have to put the Bills and the Chiefs ahead of the Dolphins because of the quarterback. I just think that's kind of what separates these three teams is the quarterbacks. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been like spectacular, but he's gotten off to a good start this year, and he hasn't really had to play hero ball. The one thing that's concerning is some of his interceptions have been, I mean, it's been bad. Some of the picks that he's thrown, but you know what? I think when he's going to have to play hero ball, that's what he's going to do. I mean, right now, he's got close to 1,600 yards passing, 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. But, and the Chiefs have played in a lot of close games this year outside of the blowout against the Bears. The Broncos game got close at one point. I mean, they were up 16-0, then it was 16-8. They kicked the field goal, so they won by 2 scores. But, I mean, at one point, that game was a one-score game. I mean, they beat the Jets by 3, the Vikings by 7. They lost to the Lions by 1. They beat the Jags by 8, and the Jags have been playing better. So, if these two teams meet again, what is the outcome going to be different? I mean, it's probably going to be an Arrowhead, so it probably is going to still be the Chiefs winning. But, I think the Chiefs, they're still trying to figure it out. The Bills, they're kind of struggling. The last 2 weeks have been struggling on offense, but again, I think they'll figure it out. I mean, they were the best team in football, coming off of that win against the Dolphins. It's just I think with what happened in London, it's gonna. I mean, that stuff's gonna happen. It's a long season, So, and obviously struggling on offense, they'll be able to figure it out. So I'm not worried about them. It's just. Is Josh Allen going to cut down on the turnovers? That's one of the things that, that concerns me. I just think it is between the Chiefs and the Bills right now. The Chiefs, they still got to get going offensively. But I think ultimately they're going to figure it out. And again, I don't want to discredit the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins can hang with both teams. Again, we'll see how the Bills and the Dolphins, what happens at the end of the year, because that game's in Miami. But, the Bills definitely showed you something when they crushed the Dolphins in that game in Buffalo. Because I think a lot of people just kind of, discounted them and they counted them out. But, that definitely showed you something. So, it's kind of tough to say because, again, all these teams have their flaws. But I'd probably give the edge to either the Chiefs or the Bills right now at this particular moment. Just because of who's at quarterback and especially because of what the Bills did against the Dolphins a couple weeks ago. Now, the Bills, they did beat the Chiefs in the regular season last year. They do play the Chiefs tough. So I'm curious to see how this match coming up this year is going to go. And obviously we'll preview it when we get to it. But I think if the Chiefs figure it out on offense, I think they kind of pull away from the Bills. Because the way their defense has been playing very well this year. And I think that's something that, that's been their weakness, and obviously they did win the Super Bowl last year. But, I mean, since Patrick Mahomes has been drafted, I mean, the weakness of the Chiefs has been their defense. I mean, he's had to, play hero ball and put up 30, 40 points a game because the defense just, at times can't stop anybody. But, I think especially, with this game coming up against the Chargers, who have a high-powered offense, I mean, we'll see what they do against the Chargers. Listen, they lost to the Lions by a point, but, the Chiefs could have won that game. They definitely could have, if not for all the drops in that game. And 7 points, was off of a pick six. So, I mean, listen, they did what they could do against the Lions, who have one of the best offenses in the NFL. So, I mean, when they go up against the Dolphins and the Bills, let's see how that defense performs against them. And we'll see, is the offense going to finally wake up and say, hey, we got to keep up with these guys, And I expect the Chiefs to try to, maybe get another wide receiver in that wide receiver room because that's one of their weaknesses too. And they had most of these guys last year for the Super Bowl run, but they got to get another receiver in there. They just have to. But I know I don't like putting the Dolphins at three, but again, based off of what the Bills did to them a couple weeks ago, let's see what they do against the Chiefs. And Tua and Mahomes have played each other before. That was back in 2020, believe it or not. The Dolphins actually almost came back in that game. And now they got Tyreek Hill. So, but I don't think, the gap is definitely closer with these teams as opposed to, well, again, the gap got a little bit closer after this week with the teams in the NFC. But, before that, I mean, the 49ers were, here, and everybody else was kind of, below them. With these teams in the AFC, it's close. And there might be even more teams that are going to close the gap. Because you still have the Ravens and you got the Bengals who are just, going to figure it out. And obviously we know the Bengals have had success against Mahomes, and they obviously beat Josh Allen in the playoffs last year. They they did play the Dolphins, but Tua got hurt early in that game, so we didn't really get to see, Burrow and Tua going at it. So, I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think. Who, in your opinion, is the best team in the AFC right now? So that's basically it when talking about this topic. So with that, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about something that is controversial. And that is whether or not Brock Purdy is a system quarterback. And, there's been a lot of discussion about it. Obviously, First Take did a topic on it yesterday. So that'll be what we talk about. But again, let me know what you guys think. In your opinion, who is the best quarterback, or the best? I keep saying that. I keep doing that. I did that in the open. But who is the best team in the AFC? Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on that. So when we come back from our first break of the show, we will discuss Brock Purdy and whether or not he is a system quarterback. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to discuss, is Brock Purdy a system quarterback or not? Now, obviously, this is kind of a topic that's been discussed, across, all forms of media, like wherever you look. And, I could see why people believe, one side or the other. For me, it's kind of tough to determine it just because, you see what Brock Purdy can do and you're like, hey, that's not something a system quarterback can do and things like that because he's accurate with the ball. I mean, he doesn't turn the ball over. But you look at but then again, you could look at who he's surrounded by, and who's his head coach, and you could say, well, he's a system quarterback. And obviously this topic has come to the forefront just because the 49ers just lost to the Cleveland Browns, who were starting a backup quarterback. And again, like I said, I could see both sides of it. For me, though, like when you look at the system, when you talk about what a system quarterback is, you got to surround your quarterback with talent. I mean, like, and you see, and I thought about this right before I came on, and again, like, they don't have nearly the system that the 49ers have. But you look at the Bears, right? They go and they trade for DJ Moore. Now, they had a good game. Now, Justin Fields had a good game against Washington. But outside of that, like, and the game against the Broncos, he wasn't doing good. Like, you surround him with talent, and he wasn't doing good before he got hurt against the Vikings. So, like, what does that show about the quarterback for the Bears? Like, Brock Purdy, you surround him with all these weapons, and he's playing really well. But again, like, I mean, the Bears they don't have nearly the team that the 49ers do. But, like, they have given Justin Fields, a top wide receiver to be successful with, and he really hasn't delivered so far. Now he's hurt, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But for me, though, like, if McCaffrey and Debo don't play against the Vikings, we'll see what Brock Purdy can do without those two guys. I mean, you still got Kittle and you still got Ayuk, but, and even if Trent Williams doesn't play, which I think they all have good chances to play. I saw that, so that's positive news there. But in the event they don't play, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, what can Brock Purdy do without those guys? And for me, the other thing too is I feel like he's doing things with that offense that, like, Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, like, couldn't do. He's like in the 15 games that he's played so far with the Niners, he's got 23 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He threw his first pick on Sunday. Doesn't turn the ball over. Passer rating, again, like, hasn't over the course of a full season. It's 15 games, but he's got a 109.6 passer rating. You look at Jimmy Garoppolo. In all of his games with the Niners, he's got a 99.2. His touchdown to interception ratio, it's 82-42. So yeah, he's throwing a lot of picks. Yards per game, he was averaging 238.6. Brock Purdy is averaging, let's go back to his numbers. His yards per game, well, it's lower than Garoppolo's, but this year he's averaging 232.7. So it's a little bit lower than Garoppolo. So Garoppolo's got him there, but I think the important thing is he's not turning the ball over. Now he did do it on Sunday, but Garoppolo turned the ball over a lot. I don't know. For me, I just feel like he's operating the offense better than what Garoppolo was doing. Now, he didn't play his best game on Sunday. He did put them in a position to win. He got them in field goal range, and that's something that, if you want to be considered, an elite quarterback, that's where you got to be money is, getting, on the road in a hostile environment against a good defense, get your team in field goal range to get a game-winning field goal. And, they had the chance to do that. It just didn't, it didn't happen. And this was with the injuries. They ended up missing the field goal. So, I mean, it's, and again, I understand why people think that he is. I mean, he is in the perfect system. And the 49ers getting Christian McCaffrey was a great move for them. So, I mean, if he misses time, we'll see, like, what Brock Purdy can do without him. But, I mean, even if he is considered a system quarterback, you're supposed to surround your quarterback with talent. Now, I don't look at Brock Purdy as an elite quarterback. Like, by no means do I think he is that. I don't think he has the best arm. But I think he is a solid quarterback. And I think when you don't turn the ball over, I think that also has got to count for something. Because Garoppolo did turn the ball over. I mean, we never really got to see what Trey Lance could do with that offense, just because he got hurt. But, I just think I think Brock Purdy is doing things with that offense that, the last couple of 49ers quarterbacks just couldn't do. So, and I just think it's too soon to tell. I mean, I feel like it's very easy to say it, especially after coming off of a loss against the Browns. But, who had a backup quarterback. But, let's see what he does, against the Eagles on the road. And let's see. And listen, he did well in the playoffs. Did very well against the Seahawks in the wild card round. He had some nice plays, of course, in the Cowboys game, even though that was a low-scoring game. We didn't really get to see what he could do against the Eagles because he got hurt. So for me, like, I don't want to say like yes or no. I think it's really like too soon to tell because, I mean, the guy's only played 15 games. But you see things where you're like, maybe he isn't. And again, it's easy to say yes. It's easier to say yes after a loss where the offense didn't look good. I mean, like, yeah, you'd probably be like, well, let's see what he's like without McCaffrey, without Debo, without all these weapons, and without Kyle Shanahan. Like, what is he? And you know what? Yeah. He was the last pick in the draft. But you know what? I would say for a guy that was the last pick in the draft, he's doing pretty well for a system quarterback. Because, like, there's been a lot of quarterbacks that have been drafted, in later rounds. Like, you put all those guys in that situation, like, are they going to do the same thing? You don't know that. Maybe the 49ers saw something in Purdy to take him, and look at what he's done. They got to the NFC Championship game with him. They maybe could have won it if he didn't get hurt. And they're tied for the best record in the NFC. And this doesn't make you a system quarterback or not, but the other thing, too, is those other two quarterbacks that they've had, Garoppolo's gotten hurt, still getting hurt. And, you hope he's okay and he's ready to play on, I don't know if he is going to be ready or not to play on Sunday. But, he was always getting hurt. Trey Lance got hurt. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's what happens. So, Brock Purdy got hurt because of a freak thing. I mean, his arm got hit. And that's why he had to, get surgery. And, thankfully he was able to come back and bounce back from that injury. But, he's played in every game so far. Again, small sample size, but the other two guys were always getting hurt. And I think that might have had to factor in as to why, the 49ers maybe moved off of Trey Lance. But I mean, listen, I really don't think you could take any guy and just throw him into this system surrounded by all these weapons and it's like go out there and be elite. You know? I mean, obviously, like Josh Johnson got thrown into the fire in the championship game, but what did he do? He didn't do anything. And then he got hurt. You know, so they believe in Brock Purdy, and you could say he's a system quarterback, but he was the last pick in the draft. And yeah, I mean, if he's on like the Giants or if he's like on the Bears or the Patriots, yeah, you probably don't even hear about him. But what he's been able to do so far, all he does is win, except for Sunday. You know, the 49ers offense, I think, has looked the best that it ever has with him. And, well, like, you know, going back to in the Garoppolo era, you know. Because obviously, I mean, you know, the Niners with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick, I mean, those offenses were very good too. Those 49ers teams were some of the best teams that I've ever seen in my lifetime, you know. But I'm just talking about like strictly from the Garoppolo era, and I'm not going to compare it to, you know, the Joe Montana era either. But you know, but I mean these 49ers teams, they're very good, and they have a lot of talent, and they're a well-run organization. So, but yeah, I mean it's going to be a discussion that's going to continue to be had, and you know, obviously for me, I'm not going to sit here and say like he definitely is or he definitely isn't, because I can definitely see both sides. I see a guy that can make good throws, but I also see a guy that's surrounded by a ton of talent. And if he doesn't have that talent, what is he then? You know, so I don't want to say, because a system quarterback to me just, you know, like minimizes what you're doing. That just labels you as a guy that, yeah, you're only good because of what you have. Now, again, he does benefit from having all of these weapons, but he's also got to make the throws and get them the ball. Again, you go back to the championship game. You take him out, nobody really did anything after that. So, you know, I think it's too soon to tell, but again, I can understand why people believe one way or the other. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, now they're coming off of a loss, and if they don't have their full array of weapons on Monday when they play the Vikings, like, let's see what he does. You know, like, obviously you want to see McCaffrey out there, you want to see Debo out there, but if they're not out there, then let's see what Brock Purdy's made of. You know? So, but let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that Brock Purdy is a system quarterback or not? Obviously, again, this is going to be a discussion that's going to continue to be had. I mean, we're going to be hearing more and more about it. But I think for me, once again, like I'm not going to sit here and say Brock Purdy is like an elite quarterback. You know, like a Mahomes or an Allen, a Burrow. But you know what? I think he's a solid quarterback, and you know, I think he's a guy that can win games. You know, so that's basically it when talking about this topic. So we're gonna move on to, you know, speaking of quarterbacks, you know, we're gonna move on to a team that's had quarterback trouble, but actually finds themselves at 3-3 on the season heading into the bye week. And they're kind of feeling good about themselves. And they actually held some of the most elite quarterbacks down and embarrassed them, as the head coach said. So when we get back from our second break of the show, we're going to talk about the Jets and their playoff chances, whether I think they will make the playoffs or not. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Jets and whether or not I think they can make the playoffs. But before I do that, once again, I want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network, and that is where you can find all the exclusive content for all of our podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. So, we are now in the third topic of today's show, and that is talking about the New York Jets and whether or not they can make the playoffs. Obviously, they're coming off of a big win against the Eagles, a game that not a lot of people really predicted them to win, myself included. And again, the offense still has its issues, but they were able to force 4 turnovers against the Eagles. Jalen Hurts threw 3 picks. The last one was obviously, a terrible interception. And, obviously that set up the Breece Hall touchdown. The Eagles couldn't, get down the field to score points in time. And they ended up losing the game 20-14. And the Jets are 3-3 going into the bye. And listen, after 4 plays into their first offensive drive, and Aaron Rodgers goes down, I mean, right then you were like, yeah, season's over for them. They're done. And you saw the Bills, score that touchdown, and it's just the stadium was electric before that game. With Rodgers coming out with the flag. And, then the energy just got sucked out of the stadium when he got hurt. And even more when Allen threw the touchdown to Diggs. But then after that, they forced turnovers. They got themselves back in the game. Garrett Wilson had that amazing touchdown. And the Jets won that game. And you thought, okay, they won, so let's see what happens. Then they get blown out by Dallas. They lose to the Patriots. But, then they're competitive against the Chiefs. They lose that game, but they beat Denver, and then they beat the Eagles, which, again, not a lot of people thought that was going to happen. And listen, I think Zach Wilson has definitely looked better. Still not great, but he's managing the game. And I think, they should open up the offense more, but I think the important thing is you got to limit the turnovers, and he hasn't turned the ball over. And they got to run they got to run the offense through Breece Hall. That's what they're going to have to do. And I thought the crazy thing about the win is the fact that the Jets didn't have their top 2 corners. They didn't have DJ Reed, and they didn't have Sauce Gardner. But the fact that they were able to pick up this win without their top 2 corners is very telling. And I think it's a credit to the coaching staff because, listening to, sports talk radio here and hearing what they have to say here in New York, Robert Saleh is talking about, we want, our players to, because they asked Robert Saleh, why, Sauce Gardner doesn't, travel with, some of the top receivers. And Robert Saleh is talking about how everybody doesn't want to do that because he wants everybody to have a role, be familiar with everybody gets a chance to do things on the defensive side of the ball, familiarize themselves with the schemes and everything. They don't want to just just have Sauce. As much as I think Sauce should do that. They want to have all the other players getting involved so they know what to do, in certain situations, if that makes sense. I didn't really explain that well, but if you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. But, the Jets defense, I don't expect them to have 4 turnovers every single game, but, as long as the defense keeps them in games, and they can run the football and Zach doesn't turn the ball over, they're going to win games. They're going to win games. And listen, I've talked about it. They have held the top, 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Okay? to actually 6 points in the second half, which is crazy to think about. Eagles didn't score in the second half. I think the Chiefs scored like 6 points in the second half, and I think the Bills, the Chiefs scored 3 in the second half against the Jets. Hold on, we have to go back for a minute, because I think the number was 6. Yeah, no, the Chiefs only scored 3 points in the second half. That was it, and the Bills scored 3. Eagles didn't score any. But the other thing too is now why I think the Jets can make the playoffs, and they probably make it as like the 6 or 7 seed, more likely the 7 seed, is because I look at their schedule, and I talked about it. They have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. So right now they're in the bye week at 3-3, but out of the bye they're against the Giants. They play against the Chargers, and I did go through the schedule, but we're going to go through it again. One of the previous segments, one of the previous shows this week. They got the Giants, then they're home against the Chargers. So, both games are home games. The Jets are playing at MetLife, but home against the Chargers, at Raiders, at Buffalo, which is going to be tough. Home against Miami, that's the Black Friday game. Home against the Falcons. They have 3 straight home games. Against the Dolphins, Falcons, Texans, at the Dolphins, home against Washington, at Browns, at Patriots. There's a lot of winnable games on that schedule. Now, the Patriots are going to give them problems because for some reason they just can't beat them. At the Browns is going to be tough because the Browns have a very good defense as well, and that could definitely be problems for the Jets offense. But again, the Jets have a very good defense themselves, and Deshaun Watson hasn't been great. Home against the Commanders. Sam Howell has looked good, but against the Bills he was bad, and the Bills have a good defense. So, and that was a home game for them. Now they're going to be coming over to MetLife, and the Jets are good at home. The Jets play well at home, so they can win that game. They could beat the Texans. They could beat the Falcons. C.J. Stroud's been good, but I think the Jets, against the rookie quarterback, they could force them into turnovers. I think the toughest games on their schedule is really, against their divisional opponents and against the Browns. And those are all road games. I think the Chargers, the other night, they just didn't look good. And, what the Jets have done against elite quarterbacks, I think it's, 2 touchdowns to... or 3 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. I think that's what it is. Because Allen threw 3, Hurts threw 3. Mahomes threw 2. I kept saying 3 because he did throw 3. He could have threw 4. And if it wasn't for penalties, he would have had more. So, against Justin Herbert, who, again, hasn't looked great. Who didn't look great the other night. I think they could force him into turnovers. So... I think there's a lot of winnable games. So I'm going to say, you beat the Giants, so that gets you to 4-3. Beat the Chargers, that gets you to 5-3. I think they beat the Raiders, so that's 6-3. I'll say they lose to Buffalo, get them to 6-4. They'll split with Miami. So 7-4, 8-4, 9-4, 9-5. Then I get them to 10-5. That's tough. I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to say that though. I think they get to nine wins. I think 9 wins is a real possibility. I don't want to say 10. Can they get to 10? I think they can, but I think 9 is a real possibility for this team. But again, that all comes down to the offense, because the defense. Listen, they've had their bad games against Dallas. They were bad, but I really do think that if the offense can limit the turnovers and they're in close games and you can run the football with Brees, they're going to win a lot of these games. Now, again, you'd like to see Zach Wilson air it out a little more. But, maybe the Jets are kind of a little hesitant with it. So we'll see. We'll see. But I think the Jets can make the playoffs. Now, whether or not they will, again, we'll just have to wait and see. But they have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. And that's why I would lean more towards, yes, they will make the playoffs, is because of their schedule. because Desmond Ridder, he doesn't. I think they could force him into turnovers. The Chargers' offense the other night didn't look great, and I think against the Jets, who have a better defense than the Cowboys right now, I think they could force Herbert into turnovers. The Giants aren't great. Well, the Giants not that they're not great, they're bad. They're really bad. So they should beat the Giants. They should. And I think they could split with Miami. I definitely think they could do that. And again, because it's a home game. And again, they what they did to Josh Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes, they could do that to Tua. They could do that to Herbert. Now, on the road, it's going to be tough. Going to Buffalo is going to be tough. Playing against Miami, and Miami is going to be tough. But the Jets, they're good at home. It just doesn't make sense why they lost to the Patriots. I could definitely see this happening. All they got to do is win and get in. But guess what? It's going to have to come against the Patriots. Week 18 of the season. I could so see that happening. And if the Patriots have 2 or 3 wins at that point, and it's coming down to that game, if the Jets lost that game, again, this is just a hypothetical scenario, but if the Jets had to win to get in against the Patriots, and the Patriots have a terrible record, and the Patriots still won, man, that would be terrible. But I don't want to speak that into existence, because I have a lot of family and friends that are Jet fans, and I'm happy for them. I am. And let's not forget, Aaron Rodgers was warming up, throwing passes before the game, no walking boot, no crutches. It might be a possibility that he can actually come back this year. Now, again, like I said the other day, I don't expect it. Jets got to make the playoffs to really make this, possible. But, yeah, if Aaron Rodgers is able to play, regardless of what Zach Wilson is doing, Aaron Rodgers is the starter. But we'll have to wait and see. But I really do think that the Jets have a formula to win, and their schedule, the hard part of their schedule is over. And they're 3-3. They beat Buffalo, they beat Philadelphia, they could have beaten Kansas City. But you know what? You'll take 3-3. You will. And now you got the lighter part of the schedule. Again, there's tough games on the schedule, but you got through the gauntlet. So I lean more towards yes, the Jets will make the playoffs. But again, there's a lot of teams that they're gonna have to deal with. They got to deal with the Ravens and the Bengals fighting for the division. Pittsburgh, Miami and Buffalo obviously are. One of them is going to be a wild card team. You got the Browns. Don't want to count them out, especially with what their defense has been doing as well. And the Jets do play them. So at the Chargers and the Raiders, they're going to be fighting for wild card spots, even though I think the Jets are better than the Raiders. The Chargers, obviously they have Herbert, and Austin Eckler just came back. Keenan Allen's having a great year, but they didn't look that good. I think the Jets can beat them. So there's a lot of teams that the Jets are going to have to fight with for a wild card spot. But you know what? The key for them is their defense and limiting turnovers on offense. And if they could do that, they continue to play well on defense, and win these close games. Who knows? Who knows? But they're heading in the right direction. I think this win definitely could go a long way for them. But we'll just have to wait and see. So that's basically it. Talking about this topic here. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think the Jets will make the playoffs, or do you think that they're going to be once again on the outside looking in? All right, so we're going to take our final break of the show, and then when we come back, we will look at the current stat leaders after Week 6 in the NFL. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're just going to go through the stat leaders after week 6 in the NFL. So we'll start off with the passing yards. So Tua Tagovailoa still leads the way with 1,876 passing yards. Kirk Cousins is second with 1,679. Matthew Stafford has 1,677, and I think, it's only going to get better with Cooper Kupp now being back. C.J. Stroud is fourth with 1,660, and Jared Goff has 1,618. All quarterbacks that are, Kirk Cousins, listen, he doesn't really have a running game right now, so obviously he's going to throw it more, and, obviously Justin Jefferson being out definitely hurts. He didn't really have his best game the other day against the Bears. Tua, listen, with Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and obviously, throwing to Mostert out of the backfield, and hopefully when Achane comes back, he'll get involved again. Tua, I think, is probably going to finish as the passing yards leader in the NFL. He should get to 5,000 yards pretty easily. And the other thing, too, is you got the extra game, too. So, and then, of course, Jared Goff is at 5. He's having a great year. I think he should get to close to 5,000 yards. Should get to 5,000 yards. But we'll see. We'll see. Because obviously now with the extra game, stats are going to go, it's going to be very easy to break a lot of passing records. And, Tua's already, close to 2,000. I think he'll get to 5,000. Goff should get close. Stafford, we'll see. We'll see. But now we go to passer rating. So, Tua leads the way in passer rating. He's got a 114.1 passer rating. Brock Purdy's in second. He's got a 111.9. That's another thing, too. Passer, listen, he's number 2 in passer rating. Again, but some people are going to discount that and just be like, yeah, system quarterback. But, was Jimmy Garoppolo second in passer rating with the 49ers? You have to go back and look. But still, again, that's one thing you got to look at. Jared Goff is third. Josh Allen is fourth. Justin Herbert is fifth. No surprise there, with some of these guys. The one thing I would say is, top 5, there's no Patrick Mahomes. There is no Patrick Mahomes right now. At least in those two categories. Christian McCaffrey obviously leads the way in rushing. Then you got Zach Moss, Achane, Karen Williams, and DeAndre Swift. 2 of those guys are hurt now. Karen Williams is actually going to miss the game against the Steelers on Sunday. Achane. It's Achane. Kept saying Achane. Achane. He's obviously on IR, but he'll be back at some point. Zach Moss is second in rushing. He's been good for the Colts. Hopefully, if they continue to get Jonathan Taylor more involved. You got a nice 1-2 combination there with those 2. And then obviously DeAndre Swift, he's been very good for the Eagles. He's fifth. And we'll see what happens with McCaffrey. Obviously, there's been positive news with, him and the other players on the 49ers that were injured. So we'll see. We'll see. Receiving, obviously Tyreek Hill, he's got 800 yards, 814 he has on the season. And then the next closest receiver is A.J. Brown with 672. Diggs has 620. Puka Nacua, he's got 598. And DJ Moore has 582. Tyreek's going to get 2,000 yards. And for me, listen, I had the 4th pick in my main league for fantasy. And I was really struggling on who I was going to pick. I really just had, I didn't know what I was going to do because I thought maybe I go with Jamar Chase if he falls to me or Eckler. But I just was I don't know. Eckler I wasn't really sure about. Well, he ended up not falling to me anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I just really didn't know what I was going to do. Because last year I had like pick number 7 or 8. And I picked Najee Harris. And that was terrible. So I said, you know what? If he falls to me, I'm going to take Tyreek Hill. And thankfully I did, because he has been awesome this year for fantasy as well. And yeah, he's going to get, if he stays healthy, because listen, he's had a couple of injuries during games, he's going to get 2,000 yards. Like, he's going to. Like, I mean, we'll see what he does against the Eagles on Sunday. I mean, if he gets like close to 200 yards and you're at 1,000 at pretty much the midway point, probably odds are he's probably going to get 2,000 yards, but we'll see. So we go to the sacks leaders. Danielle Hunter's tied with T.J. Watt at 8. Danielle Hunter could possibly be somebody that maybe the Vikings trade. You know, a team that's looking for a pass rusher. You got the other Josh Allen's got 7, and apparently he doesn't like when people say that. Which honestly, I don't really blame him. Like, you're being called the other Josh Allen because everybody knows the Josh Allen on the Bills. But yeah, I mean, he's a good player. 7 sacks for him. Trey Hendrickson has 7, and Khalil Mack has 7. Obviously, you know, he had that 6-sack game, so that's kind of helped him. Jesse Bates, Jacobs for the Lions, Nelson for the Texans. You know, several players are tied for 3 interceptions in the NFL. Stone for the Ravens, Williams for the Jags. Zaire Franklin still leads the way in tackles. TJ Edwards has 68 for the Bears. So those are like the, you know, for players. Now you look at like the teams. Dolphins still lead the way in rushing. That's like one thing that that I didn't actually, you know, didn't mention when I was talking about the best teams in the AFC. And that's one thing that I would say the Dolphins. Now, the Chiefs, Pacheco's been good, but the Dolphins are rushing for almost 200 yards per game. You know, the Bills don't really have a good ground game. I mean, well, James Cook's been good, but like they don't use it enough. But the Dolphins have been good running the football. You know, and then you look at like scoring. I mean, the Dolphins are one of the top the top team. They're averaging 37.2. You know, points per game. You got the Niners in second, Bills in third. You know, that's why I hate like disrespecting the Dolphins. And obviously, like, you know, their total offense per game, you know, they're averaging almost 500 yards per game. You know, and the Chiefs have 382.3 behind the Eagles and the Lions, and then the Bills have you know, 374.8. But, you know, it's because of that game against the Bills. I mean, the Bills just dominated them. And that's why I look at, you know, the Chiefs and the Bills as being the better teams. Well, I mean, the Chiefs is kind of different just because, you know, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. I mean, I'd take them over the Dolphins right now. The Dolphins do look better than the Chiefs offensively, but, I mean, when these two teams play each other in Germany, I'm probably going to, you know, favor the Chiefs. But, you know, we'll see. It'll be very telling. I don't know. Not that it's a bad thing. I think it's great that we're actually going to have a game, you know, overseas that is going to be worth the watch, because a lot of times we don't really get that. I mean, Germany is getting a great game between, you know, two teams that are fighting for home field advantage right now. Because, you know, the Dolphins did lose to the Bills, but they still got a better record than them. You know, like these two teams are going to go at it, you know, with the two best records in the AFC. And it could be for home field advantage. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's definitely something to look forward to. But I don't know. I kind of wish I would have loved to have seen them, you know, playing in Arrowhead or Miami, you know. But maybe in the playoffs. In the playoffs we will, most likely, you know, depending on how the playoffs shape out. But, yeah, so then you go on, like, the defensive side of things. So the Ravens and the Bills are actually tied for the league lead in sacks. The Ravens have 24. The Bills have 24. The Chargers have 21. Dolphins have 21. And the Eagles have 20. Niners lead the way in interceptions. They got 10. So no surprise there. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much it when you look at the stats, the stat leaders after this week. Not really a surprise with some of those things. But yeah, also I actually wanted to throw in some other news that I didn't touch upon. But the Eagles, they actually signed Julio Jones to a contract for the remainder of the season. Obviously, Julio Jones is not the same player that he was. Obviously when the Falcons went to the Super Bowl, he was arguably the best receiver in the game. But since then, injuries and just getting older, and he did play last year, believe it or not, with the Buccaneers. Didn't really do that much with them because, again, he was also hurt. But I mean, for a guy that could be like your number 3 wide receiver, I think this is not a bad signing for the Eagles. I don't really think he's going to do that much with them, but I mean, if he turns back the clock and is anywhere close to what he was, with the Falcons, I mean, that's a plus for them. And I actually forgot that that he played for the. Well, no, I knew he played for the Titans, but I just forgot about him and AJ Brown being teammates, even though Julio Jones was on the Titans. And now obviously AJ Brown is with the Eagles now. I know, because remember, I mean, people thought that offense was going to be special with Julio Jones, with AJ Brown, and Derrick Henry. That offense, you would have thought oh my God, this team is going to be insane. This offense is going to be insane. But that really wasn't the case. Now, I think if they had Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, one of those guys throwing to them instead of Ryan Tannehill, that's probably different. But now they got Jalen Hurts throwing them the ball. I didn't even mention Jalen Hurts. I just said Josh Allen, Mahomes. But yeah, I mean, now you got Jalen Hurts throwing them the ball. So, let's see. Can Julio? I mean, listen, I think Julio could do okay. I don't think he's gonna, but he's not going to have to do much because you got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, you got Goddard, you run the football well with your running backs, with Swift, Gainwell, all those guys. So Julio Jones really doesn't have to be, the Julio Jones of old. He just has to be a number 3 wide receiver. And I think Julio Jones is a number 3 wide receiver at this point in his career. That's good. I think you'd want to have Julio Jones as your number 3 wide receiver. And it's another weapon for Hurts to throw to. So, we'll see what happens. But I know that was a topic of discussion yesterday, and we'll see what he could do. I mean, we'll see if he suits up on Sunday, because that's a game that we're definitely gonna do a segment for, and that's the Eagles and the Dolphins. You got 2 high-powered offenses going at it. And that's a big game for both teams. Both teams are coming in with 1 loss. Eagles obviously coming off of their first loss this past week. And, the Dolphins, they lost to the Bills a couple weeks ago, and this is a big game for them. They're going into Philly, and I think it should be a very good game. So we'll see. But we'll talk about it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the show today. Obviously, after this, I will go and record the Patreon portion of the show, and then that'll be it. I'm working on getting. I'll have last night's show reposted, the 4 parts. I'll do that once I'm done with the Patreon, and then you'll have the shorts that'll come out. Obviously, doing the football shorts and the baseball shorts as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I thank you guys for tuning in today. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll preview the Thursday night game, Jags and the Saints. We'll preview that, and we'll have some other stuff planned to talk about as well. So until then, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.